John Cole with DiscountJuicers.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. You might be thinking, hey John, where's the juicer, man? I thought you do juicers. Well, I also do gardening, and today's episode is actually inspired by my garden. In particular, I was out gardening, and look at all these amazing, beautiful leafy greens I have. I want to encourage you guys to not only eat, but also juice and even blend your leafy greens. I think the average American gets, less than a half a pound per person per year in, for example, kale. And my goal every day is to eat 2 pounds of leafy greens a day, and that's definitely a lot of leafy greens. But it can be made super simple by literally juicing them. You could literally take 1 pound of leafy greens, condense them down into like literally around 1 cup of juice, and now you could get the nutrition out of the leafy greens into you. It's the nutrition that I'm really after, to be healthy, to lose weight, to have more energy. I've learned that, there's different phytochemicals and phytonutrients, aside from the vitamins and minerals, that are very important in the leafy greens that may help us, ward off things like cancer and all these kind of things. So anyways, we're in the garden today, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick some leafy greens out of the garden. We got some beautiful collard greens here, getting nice and large. Well, I could use these for like a wrap and make like a little burrito wrap out of these because they're so big. I like to generally pick the large ones and juice them on up. They juice up really well, and you don't need a lot of them, to get to the 1 pound that I'm shooting for in my juice every day. I think we'll pick a few more of these, and then we'll head over to the juicer that we're going to use today, the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer. Now we're ready to get juicing with the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer. Now, the first thing I want to say is if you want to juice like almost all greens or virtually all greens, the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer or any other vertical single auger juicer is not the one that I would recommend for you guys. You guys then want to go with the horizontal auger style machine, which is far more effective when juicing straight leafy greens alone. The problem with the vertical machines is that as the pulp comes out, it actually has to make a right hand turn, and then things can get clogged in that. So we're going to juice a few different items in the juicer today that's going to ease the pressure of the greens, plus we're going to use our knife and pre-cut our greens so it will work properly in the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer. Now before I get into juicing the greens, you might be thinking, John, man, I really liked your garden. You might still be thinking about my garden. I want to always encourage you guys to start off with the highest quality produce you can juice. So for me, what that means, it simply means grow it yourself, because standard conventional agriculture, big agriculture, is not growing the most nutrient dense foods as they possibly can. They're growing the largest foods because, think about it, you pay for produce by the pound. The more the produce weighs, the more money the farmer could get. So I'm trying to grow nutrient dense crops, and I put 70 plus trace minerals back into my soil to assure that my plants are going to get all the nutrition they need to thrive, and then consequently so that I can eat them and then get all the nutrition that I need to thrive as well. In standard agriculture, it's common practice to add maybe 3 minerals, NPK fertilizers, back in the soil, and that's really not doing it for us. So I encourage you guys to have a garden, grow your own food. You can even grow sprouts and microgreens inside your apartment in New York City if you don't have a yard. And if you want to learn more about gardening, I encourage you guys to check out my other YouTube channel, Growing Your Greens, which is where I teach you guys how to grow your own food. And then, of course, you get a juicer to juice it on up and get healthier than ever before. In any case, let's go ahead and start juicing with the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer. First step, very important when making a green juice in the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer or any other vertical juicer, is to properly prepare the produce. This is where most people fail because, unfortunately, directions such as this are not included in the instruction manual to any vertical slow juicer that I'm aware of at this time. As you guys can see here, we got the collard greens washed, and we got a whole bunch of them, almost like a deck of cards, a deck of collard greens. There's actually a dozen leaves here, and this dozen leaves weighs about 1 pound. So I've met my quota for my 1 pound of greens in this one juice. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take all these guys, and I've lined them all up, and we're simply going to go ahead and roll these guys up into like a big fatty, a big fat greenie, big fat cigar. So as you guys can see, we got a nice roll there. Can I smoke it? No. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to simply take the knife, and we're just going to cut it into little strips. So my goal is to do 1/8 inch strips. Like, this is really small strips here. That might be a little bit too wide. I like to get them a little bit thinner. And the reason why I'm doing this is because we need to break up those long fibers that are in the leafy greens. Most importantly in the stalk. I mean, the greens, not that critical, but mostly in the stalk. This is especially important when juicing large greens. If you're juicing like little baby greens that are pre-washed from Costco, for example, you don't need to, you could omit this step because they're so soft. But as the greens get larger, big bunches of kale, big bunches of collard greens, big bunches of Swiss chard, you will need to cut them for the best results. And the thing is, if you don't cut them, your juicer is going to jam up. It's going to make excessively more pulp, and you know, you might not be happy. So this is what is required to make a green juice in this juicer. Now there are other juicers if you don't want to do all this pre-cutting. You know, you don't have to. You can get a juicer that doesn't require all this pre-cutting, and that's fine. But you know, once again, every juicer has their pros and cons. Despite the pre-cutting, the Kuvings whole slow juicer is a juicer that sits on my countertop that I use each and every day. Actually, for breakfast, I made cactus fruit coconut milk, and that was definitely delicious. So yeah, I find I use my Kuvings whole slow juicer a lot, actually, because of the 3-inch wide feed chute. It just makes juicing a lot easier and more convenient for me, so that I'm more apt to do it. And you know, I don't want to sell you a juicer and then it sits there on your counter and you never use it, because then, you know, despite you having one of the best juicers, it's not benefiting you if you're not using it every day. And that's one of the features, one of the big features actually I like about the Kuvings whole slow juicer. You know, they make it easy to clean with 3 included cleaning brushes, and also they make it easy to juice with a wide feed chute. So I'm just about done cutting up the last bit of stalk. Now it's very important to cut up the stalk, and yes, you can juice the stalks of the produce. There's actually a lot of liquid in there. It's very important to cut up the stalk because the stalk is where all the strings are. They're going to get clogged in the ejection port when where the pulp comes out. So once we got all this cut up, you guys can see we got a nice pile here. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put this in a bowl. I got a hairdo. We got all that cut up collard greens in a bowl. Next, we're going to do celery. So I do recommend like something like celery, cucumber, zucchini, or romaine hearts. Make up the bulk of your juice. It's going to make a green juice much more diluted. If you just did straight collard greens, like 1 pound, it'd be really strong. Many of you guys might gag and even actually hurl because of it. I always recommend you guys to dilute it down. So 75% of the glass should be something like the celery or cucumbers, romaine hearts, zucchini, and then the other 25% should be the dark leafy greens. And now that's for beginners. As you get into juicing more, you'll be able to stomach and handle more greens straight. Some people don't particularly like the taste of a green juice straight because it does have a different flavor than you might be used to. I just love it. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and cut this celery up. And also very important to cut your celery. So all celery and leafy greens should be pre-cut to put in the Kuvings whole slow juicer. This for one very important reason. It's these long fibrous strings here. Look at that. I don't know if you guys could see that. It's like really thin. Man, this will get stuck in your teeth. It also gets stuck in the ejection port and cause a backup situation, which is not good. So that's why we're going to pre-cut the produce. So on the celery, very easy. What I like to do is just cut off the end here. And we're going to go ahead and compost this. I always recommend you guys to compost instead of throw things away. And now we're just going to, once again, cut this into 1/8-inch pieces. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, John, I got the Kuvings whole slow juicer, man. I didn't want to have to cut produce. Well, you know, on leafy greens and celery, you will need to pre-cut them. On cucumbers, you don't need to pre-cut them. On carrots, as long as they're not, you know, too fat of a diameter, you will not need to cut them. But on any slow juicer, any vertical slow juicer, you will need to pre-cut your produce. Now there's one exception here. If you're making like a glass of 8 ounces of juice with not making a big quantity like I am today, you could get away with actually not cutting your produce or cutting it into larger pieces. The thing you're going to remember is if you put in larger pieces of celery especially, your outlet port is going to clog and then the juicer will not really function properly. But if you're doing like 8 ounces of juice, you should be able to get away with it because the juicer will clog up by the time you're done. If you want to juice larger volumes, then you're going to have to cut it into smaller pieces. So what I show is I just show the optimal way of preparing produce, and this is what I recommend so that you don't have any headaches or any problems. We got all this celery chopped up. Next thing we're going to do is get juicing. So the recipe today I'm going to use is celery is my base because it makes up the majority of what I'm juicing today. In addition, I got a half dozen apples here and 1 lemon, which you do not need to pre-cut because it'll fit in the Kuvings whole slow juicer in one whole piece of fruit, and I like this. It's going to save me a little bit of time. So when juicing in the Kuvings whole slow juicer, you want to rotate the produce you're juicing. An average person might be like, okay, John, I got all the celery. Let's just put all the celery through the juicer, and then put all the greens, and then put the apples and the lemon in. That'd be a really bad idea. The celery would juice pretty good. Once the celery's in there, it's kind of blocking up the feed chute. You'd put the greens in there, then it would start to back up. And by the time you got to the apples and the lemon, it's really not going to be working well at all, actually. You need to follow a proper procedure, much like if you have a stick shift car, right? You can't just get in the car, put it in first gear, and press the gas, right? It's not going to go. You got to put the clutch in, put it in gear, let the clutch out slowly, feather the gas on, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with the Kuvings whole slow juice. You just got to learn how to use it properly. So the main thing I want to sum up is that you want to vary the different textures. And you always want to start with the softest texture, go into the hardest texture. So in this instance, the softest textures would be the fruits, the apples and the lemon. Then this one that's a little bit softer then is the greens, and then the celery would be the more firmest and hardest texture. It'd be very good if I actually juice carrots, and I do encourage you guys to juice carrots each and every time you use the Kuvings whole slow juicer. This will make it work, 50% better, because carrots are the ideal and optimal fiber to help the Kuvings whole slow juicer push out all that residual pulp that's stuck in the machine. Softer fruits like apples, especially if they're old and mealy and soft, so pick hard fruits whenever you're juicing them, and pick the freshest produce when you can get it, because soft and wilty things are not going to juice well. And no, you cannot juice frozen vegetables, previously frozen vegetables. Now let's go ahead and turn on the Kuvings whole slow juicer and get juicing. So first we're going to use one of those apples. Now to juice apples you do need to remove the stem, but you can put the apple in whole. Look at that, drops right in. Now it will stop and you will need to use the pusher to push the apple in past the safety switch, and then it'll actually take a bite off each piece of the apple, and as you guys can see we're getting the juice out. Now to catch the juice, I'm not using the standard included plastic catch cup that's included with the Kuvings whole slow juicer. I choose to use an 8-cup Anchor Hawking measuring cup or measuring bowl. These are available at a local big box store such as Target or Walmart, and this is what I recommend. In addition, another thing I'm using is a standard sieve. The Kuvings whole slow juicer does not come with a sieve. I told them they should include one. But the all vertical upright juicer such as the Kuvings whole slow juicer makes some of the pulpiest juice. As you guys can see after juicing that one little apple, we just already have some pulp there that's caught. I prefer a pulp-free juice. There's nothing wrong with drinking pulp, but I like it pulp-free. Just makes it taste that much better, so I could drink it and enjoy it that much more. So yeah, you'll have to pick up an accessory strainer or sieve. They're relatively inexpensive, so you might also want to do that at the big box store when you're there, picking up your glass bowl so you could juice lots of juice at one time. So now that we put the apple in, next thing we're going to go ahead and put in some greens. We'll put a couple handfuls of greens in there. I like how I could just literally, once I got the greens pre-cut, drop them in and they juice right up. I always encourage you guys to keep your juice flap up and always let the juice fall out. One of the things I've learned about all vertical slow juicers, if you keep the cap down, the pulp comes out wetter, so then you're losing some yield actually. So we're just going to continue to grab maybe like another handful of these greens here. And one of the things I wish the Kuvings whole slow juicer had was a funnel on the top, because sometimes things will drop around and out of it, whereas other vertical slow juicers do have a funnel. So once we got the apple, the greens, next the hardest thing we got is the celery. So we're going to put a nice big handful of celery in there. Leave a little bit more. And one of the things you want to be aware of when juicing the Kuvings whole slow juicer is the outlet port here. You always want to make sure pulp is flowing out the outlet port, and it looks like it's coming out nice and wide. That's a good sign. As if the pulp is still flowing, it's definitely a good thing. If your pulp stops flowing, then that means you have a backup situation, which is really not good. In that case, then you want to try to feed something like carrots to see if that'll help unjam it. Otherwise, you may have to actually stop the machine and disassemble. But don't be too fast to think, oh, it's jammed up because it hasn't come out. Feed a couple extra things before, you determine that it is jammed up for sure, because it really doesn't jam that often, especially, I've never had it jam if you properly prepare the produce, let's put it that way. Alright, so now that we did the celery, we're going to go ahead back, do another apple right in the machine. Once again, we're going to use our pusher to push that apple in there. I really like how the juicer just literally goes around and chunks off chunks of the apple at one time. Nice, strong, and powerful. Actually, this has the most powerful motor of any vertical single auger juicer that I'm aware of. Okay, now the greens. Next, of course, after the greens, we got to do the celery, very important. The celery in this recipe is what's really helping push things out. Like, for example, if you just did greens and apple, man, it's not going to work too well in the Kuvings Slow Juicer. That'd be, a good recipe for horizontal single auger machine. I do recommend adding some celery or some carrots into the recipe. Carrots would be much more ideal than the celery. So I'll put another little bit of celery. Now, as you guys can see, our pulp is still flowing out. And it's probably flowing out like 80% of the ejection port. So I want you guys to strive to do that. If your ejection port clogs up, more than likely it's because you didn't cut things, small enough. Now let's see, next, another apple. I really enjoy putting apples in the Kuvings Slow Juicer. No extra cutting is required. And I want you guys to slow down when using the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer, right? It's a slow juicer, it's not a fast juicer. Just because the feed chute's wide, don't be cramming things in as fast as you possibly can. Like, I'm going at a slow, moderate pace. I'm talking to you guys today, but I'm letting the machine work before I add the next item. So we just had the apple, now we're going to add another handful of the greens here. Now, one of the things you might want to do, like, John, something's stuck in there, man, I could put my knife in there, my fork, or even my hands or something. Don't put anything in the juicer except the included pusher. Number one, whatever you put in there, will be probably damaged if it comes in contact with the auger. It can get hurt, and there's a nice caution on here. Do not put your hands or anything else in the auger into the juicer. It will not be covered under warranty if you do something like that. And I've had 3 ex-girlfriends now put things into juicers and break my juicers. Each one of them have done it. And I'm telling you guys now, don't do it. So it's progressing well. Looks like the pulp is slowed down coming out of the outlet feed chute. That's your sign that it's time to put some more produce into the machine. We're gonna let it chop up that apple before adding our greens. So I hope you guys are getting the idea. Once again, we want to rotate the produce from softest to hardest, pre-cut all the produce, and the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer is going to work great for you. Now we're going to juice that lemon. You might be thinking, John, can I juice the seeds in the lemon? Was it alright to juice the seeds in the apple? Well, my personal opinion is that the apple seeds do contain some nutrition in there that are and is probably beneficial for us in small amounts. I wouldn't sit there and grind up a bunch of apples and eat them because they do contain toxins in there like cyanide. But I don't have a problem juicing an occasional apple and getting some of the nutrition out of the seed into my juice. Same thing with lemons. Now, fruits that have big pits such as plums and apricots and peaches and nectarines, you definitely will want to remove. But things like melons, like watermelon, cantaloupes, lemons, citruses, you could totally put them in, seeds and all. I always like to add lemon to my juice, not only for the flavor, but because it has the citric acid. The citric acid helps keep your juicer fresher longer. This is especially important if you want to save your juice. Now, all the slow juicer manufacturers say you can store the juice up to 3 days. I always encourage you guys to drink the juice right after it's made for the highest benefit. Alright, so we got our last fruit in there, and you might be thinking, John, what do you do, man? you're out of the greens now. What are you gonna do with the rest of the celery? That's all right. If you run out of produce, you want to be sure to run out of the soft things. So like the soft things were the apples, the lemon, and the greens first. If you end up with the last thing, the hardest thing, that's what you want to end up with. It'd be really not a good idea to, you know, use all your celery and have some leftover greens and apples, right? You always want to try to gauge it and not put too much of any one item in so that you always have leftover, you know, celery or something like carrots that'll help push things through the machine at the end of your juicing experience. So now we're just gonna go ahead and feed the rest of this celery in to finish off my green juice. We got our last handful of celery here. Drop that right in the machine. Let it juice it on up. Now, it's very important once you're done using the Kuvings whole slow juicer or any other vertical auger juicer, you don't want to just put the stuff in, turn the machine off, right? It's not done that quick. It's a slow juicer. You need to let it kind of run a little while, and you're gonna keep an eye on where the juice is flowing out, right? As soon as it pretty much stops the juice coming out, you're gonna want to turn it off. I mean, it looks like still the juice is still flowing out, so I'm just gonna leave it on just a little bit longer. Maybe 30 seconds is sufficient. So it looks like it's just basically dribbling out now, dripping out. So we're gonna go ahead and turn the machine off. And I want to take a look at the pulp and show you guys the pulp on this. You know, I started with a pound of leafy greens, a whole head of celery, 6 apples and 1 lemon, and it was turned into this much pulp. And when I pick up this pulp, put it in my hand and try to squeeze it, I get a few drips out. You know, it's not super dry, but the Kuvings whole slow juicer has done quite an excellent job in my opinion, and at least as well as other vertical slow juicers, or most of them anyways. And next we're going to go ahead and put our cap down. This will prevent dripping on the top of your counter. Next we're going to go ahead and show you guys how much pulp was created. Once again, the vertical single auger machines do create the most amount of pulp in the juice, and the Kuvings whole slow juicer is no exception. So you guys can see there's the pulp that it was created. You know, no problem with drinking this pulp if you don't mind the texture. I prefer not to have texture in my juice, so we're going to take it out. And I like to usually set this on the top of the machine to drip in there. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to take our glass here and we're going to pour off a nice glass of green juice. Look at that nice consistency there. I can't wait to drink it. Wow. It's quite a good recipe. The celery kind of gives it some saltiness. The apples give it a little bit of sweetness. The lemon kind of gives it that tartness, and the greens fire you up full of nutrition. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode learning how to make a green juice in the Kuvings whole slow juicer. Once again, my name is John Kohler with DiscountJuicers.com. Be sure to visit DiscountJuicers.com/YouTube for special promotional offers for our YouTube visitors. All right, this is John Kohler with DiscountJuicers.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you, and what we're going to do in today's episode is we're going to talk about and unbox the all-new Kuvings whole slow juicer that's now available on Discount. This is John Kohler with DiscountJuicers.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. You might be thinking, hey John, where's the juicer, man? I thought you do juicers. Well, I also do gardening, and you know, today's episode is actually inspired by my garden. In particular, I was out gardening, and look at all these amazing, beautiful leafy greens I have. I want to encourage you guys to not only eat, but also juice and even blend your leafy greens. I think the average American gets, less than a half a pound per person per year in, for example, kale. And my goal every day is to eat 2 pounds of leafy greens a day, and that's definitely a lot of leafy greens. But it can be made super simple by literally juicing them. You could literally take 1 pound of leafy greens, condense them down into like literally around 1 cup of juice, and now you could get the nutrition out of the leafy greens into you. It's the nutrition that I'm really after, you know, to be healthy, to lose weight, to have more energy. I've learned that, you know, there's different phytochemicals and phytonutrients, aside from the vitamins and minerals, that are very important in the leafy greens that may help us, you know, ward off things like cancer and all these kind of things. So anyways, we're in the garden today, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick some leafy greens out of the garden. We got some beautiful collard greens here, getting nice and large. Well, I could use these for like a wrap and make like a little burrito wrap out of these because they're so big. I like to generally pick the large ones and juice them on up. They juice up really well, and you don't need a lot of them, you know, to get to the 1 pound that I'm shooting for in my juice every day. I think we'll pick a few more of these, and then we'll head over to the juicer that we're going to use today, the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer. Now we're ready to get juicing with the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer. Now, the first thing I want to say is if you want to juice like almost all greens or virtually all greens, the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer or any other vertical single auger juicer is not the one that I would recommend for you guys. You guys then want to go with the horizontal auger style machine, which is far more effective when juicing straight leafy greens alone. The problem with the vertical machines is that as the pulp comes out, it